Here are the top 7 ways hackers are using AI to get your data. Number 1, automation. So in the past, a hacking group would actually need a group. You need one guy to send an email in a phishing campaign, maybe another person looking at the responses, another person dumping the data into a database. Because you're not doing this just to one person, they're doing this to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, casting as wide a net as they can. And you need different people to factor in different components of the data coming in and going out. So now with AI, you have almost an unlimited workforce, right? You can have AI sending the messages, you have AI reading the messages, interpreting them, and then sending another message to try to communicate with you so you think maybe it's really the bank, maybe it's really your boss, maybe it's really someone important in your family, all these types of things. So with automation in AI, you can turn one hacker into a team of 100 or more if that hacker's smart enough to understand how to use the AI tools. And we got to be very, very careful with this. So how do you mitigate this risk? Well, you have to be very diligent about looking at the red flags that come from just regular things like email, phone calls, text messages. The best thing to do is, when in doubt, scrutinize, right? If you get an email from your boss that doesn't seem right, they're asking you to buy gift cards, or asking you to wire money to this random place, or change wiring instructions. These types of things should always be verified with a phone call, some other method that you know you can talk to this person. Even better to just walk down the hall and talk to your boss and say, hey, I wanted to just verify that this was true. I promise you they'll be way more happy that you're coming to verify because you're aware of these scams than them thinking that you're bothering them, right? So that's probably the best way to mitigate. Number 2, phishing enhancements. In the past, when you're setting up a phishing campaign as a hacker, let's assume again with Wells Fargo, you have to set up a fake Wells Fargo website. You buy a domain called Wells Fargo with a Q instead of a G. And now you set up this page with the Wells Fargo logo and all these things that is not very hard to do. And it looks like Wells Fargo, but it's not really the Wells Fargo URL. And then the same thing with an email template with the Wells Fargo logos and this and that to make everything look real. This takes time. This takes time in coding, in implementation, in setup. Now with AI, you can have AI build a website. You can have AI build the email templates. You can have AI do a lot of this heavy lifting so that instead of this setup for the phishing campaign taking a month or a week or however long it takes, it's a fraction of the time. This thing can be set up in half a day. So this is very, very tricky because it makes phishing campaigns easier to make, so you're going to see more of them. Well, how do you mitigate this risk? Well, you have to be very diligent again in looking at the markers of phishing. One is the domain names. Be very, very careful at looking at, is it wellsfargo.com or is it wellsfarco.com or is it wellsfargo556123xyz.com, right? That's a very big telltale sign. Same thing with not just the websites, but the emails they're coming from. A lot of times someone will send you an email from johnsmith123@gmail.com, but they make their name Wells Fargo. So first you see Wells Fargo, you don't even look at the email. The email is a lot harder to fake. So make sure you pay attention to all these little telltale signs. And a lot of these are in aggregate, right? If you look at the website, you look at the email address, and then also look at misspellings. It's very rare that Wells Fargo will misspell words, right? Syntax, grammar, punctuation. If you can, just pay attention to those things. And a lot of this, again, is an aggregate. Web domain, email, grammar and syntax, context, right? Is Wells Fargo going to ask you to wire money somewhere else to cover a fee, right? Most likely not. So these are the things to look out for. Number 3, adapting malware code. The way malware works is malware is downloaded to your computer, and then it tends to grab information and either send it back to the hackers, or it tends to do something to your computer like automate an email that you will send out to all your contacts and you didn't even know that it's sent out. So antivirus and anti-malware software, what they're trained to do is sniff out this malware. And there's signs that the malware gives off. There's codes that it tries to run that tips off the antivirus and the anti-malware. So this is a game of cat and mouse with the hackers that are writing the malware and with the big antivirus companies, the Microsoft Defenders, the Kaspersky's, the Sentinel ones. Malware is written, maybe it lasts a day, a week, an hour, and the big boys catch the code, the new code, and alert national and international lists so everyone blocks it at the same time or within a very short frame of time so that that malware is useless. Then what the hackers used to have to do is rewrite that malware and test it and try to develop something new that the antivirus and anti-malware cannot see. So you can see this process takes time. You write a code, it takes a month to develop it, it gets shut down in a week. Then they go back and write the code, they find a hole, they deploy it, and it gets shut down in a day. With AI now, that code can be written faster. What takes a team a week, a month, a quarter to rewrite in terms of malware code could take AI an hour or less. So it's a very, very big risk. We're going to see more and more of these malware attacks happening. And so we have to be very, very careful. How do you mitigate the risk? You have to be very, very careful with what you click on in terms of email links, in terms of websites that you go to that you're not sure, that you've never been to. And that's how malware gets on your computer. Mainly bad email links, bad web domains, and places that you've never been to on the web. So you got to be very, very careful of what you download onto your computer. You want to make sure it's from trusted sources. And if you're in doubt, always contact your IT team and they can double check the installation file. Number 4, stealth malware. So malware traditionally, if it's sitting on a computer, it executes commands like sending out email on your behalf or recording data and sending it back to home base. And a lot of times that information that's sent back isn't long lived because antivirus, anti-malware systems start to pick it up after a bit of time. So what's happening is hackers are training malware to become stealth. They'll sit on a system undetected for months just collecting data, and sending it back to home base. And it knows to adapt its own code based on the sniffers and the antivirus and the anti-malware. So it's the cat and mouse game is becoming faster, especially to the hacker's advantage, because that stealth malware can sit on the computer and it'll just sit there collecting data and being unnoticed because the malware itself has an AI built in where it's adapting its code. So that's a very, very big risk. How do you mitigate this risk? Well, one, you want to make sure whatever antivirus and anti-malware you have is always up to date. And you always want to be careful of your computer being somewhat slow when you're not really using it. Maybe you can look at in your task manager, you can see that there's internet traffic being moved, uploaded to the internet, but you're not doing anything, right? So that's one of the telltale signs. This one's a little harder to snuff out, but if you're diligent enough, if you notice computer being slow, your internet being slow, you can always open up your task manager and look at internet traffic. And if you're not doing anything, you're sitting watching your computer, there should not be a lot of traffic moving up and down. Obviously, your email in the background, if you have Outlook or you have other internet-based programs that are syncing, like there's going to be some, but you'll be able to see some interesting spikes. Number 5, fake voice built by AI. This is an interesting one. And I'm sure you've probably seen some takes on social media where people are talking about they try to get scammed by someone that sounds like a family member, right? So what happens is AI will learn your voice with videos that you posted on the internet or any source that they can find of your voice. A lot of times it's videos that you posted on the internet. And as it trains itself, it can then mimic your voice almost undetectable to the naked ear, or even sometimes undetectable to software if they have enough reference voice. So an AI calls my wife and says, "Hey, honey, I'm in a lot of trouble. I need $5,000 wired to me right now. I can't talk long, otherwise I'm going to be in very big trouble. But please send it to this phone number on Zelle or this address or this wire instructions. I got to go by." Hangs up. Well, my wife's going to freak out. Oh my God, he needs $5,000. I'm going to send it to him now. And so that's, again, something you may have seen on social media. This is happening more and more. Some things are happening where calls are going out as if a family member's kidnapped. So it's a very, very scary situation. And how do you mitigate this risk? The best thing to do is that if my wife gets a phone call from me like this, chances are it's not going to be from my phone number. It's going to probably be from a blocked number or a weird number. the best thing for my wife to do is call my cell phone number. Hey, what happened? Why'd you call me about this? And I'd say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's probably a scam, right? That's one example. And that's probably the best way to fight this type of AI scam, because it's very hard when you're hearing your loved one and panic in their voice and all you want to do is help them. So the best thing to do is just take a deep breath, make the call to that person directly, or if they're close, go physically try to see them. But that's probably the best way to mitigate that risk. Number 6, social pattern recognition. This is an interesting one. If someone was targeting you and they wanted to look at your social media, look at any public information on your LinkedIn or any other websites or social media sites, they can start to compile some information about you and use it against you. Where you like to eat, what you like to do on the weekends, where you've worked. All this information can be put together in almost like a case file, like an FBI case file type of thing. They can figure out all this information and then use it against you, whether it's your banking, calling your job, calling your phone company and trying to get an electronic SIM made so they can impersonate you more. The more information they have on you, the more they can exploit and blackmail you. And in the past, compiling this case file would take a lot of effort and a lot of time for each individual person. And maybe it's not worth it for the normal person out there like myself. You'd have to go through a lot of trouble to get a lot of information on me and then try to use it against me in creative ways. It's a lot of work, and a lot of times it's not worth it. With AI can do all this heavy lifting. It could go on social media, figure out, I like to eat at this Chinese restaurant, figure out that I worked at this bank last year or I work for them now, and so on and so forth. So if the hacker is handed this case file by AI, they didn't have to do any work. Probably within an hour or two, which normally could take a month, they can create a blackmail campaign and say, okay, well, I know you like to eat at this restaurant, you go to this bank, you work at this place. I'm going to send you an email and say, hey, I know all this stuff about you and I'm coming after you. If you don't send me 1 Bitcoin now, your whole life's over, right? This is stuff that actively happens, not very often because of how much time it takes to build these case files. But with AI, this is going to happen a lot more, right? You can just imagine how much someone can try to blackmail you or try to harm you if they knew all these things about you and they could compile them into a readable case file that you can act on like this. So how do you mitigate this risk? This is an interesting one because with the advent of social media, a lot of more information is out in the public eye for each individual person than was 20 years ago, right? So number one, I would say be very conscious of what you share to the internet, right? If you can make your page private, even better. If not, just be very conscious of what you put out there. The other thing is, if you ever get a threatening email like this, please reach out to your IT person to help you figure out, is there a real threat, right? This has been going on for a long time, especially blackmailing wealthier people, because for the hacker, it's worth the time to put these case files together and potentially get a big reward. For the more normal person, it's never really been worth it until potentially now, where those case files are presented to them and they send out mass emails based on this case information, and whatever comes back, they'll take. Whatever doesn't, they leave it alone. So just be very conscious that this happens. And if you get a threatening letter like this, think back to what you've put out to the internet, what someone could see on LinkedIn, on the Facebooks, on business listings, on social listings, whatever it is. And if you need more help, contact your IT person because they can help trace some of this back with you. Number 7, misinformation and fake news. This is an interesting one because everyone can probably draw to some experience they had with fake news or something of the like, especially with the last major presidential election. There was a lot of potential fake news out there, people claiming this, people claiming that, and some of it was real, some of it was fake. And you can see how with social media, how easily fake news can spread. Obviously, the social media companies are trying to mitigate that, but it's still not that hard to put out fake news, right? So for example, Wells Fargo sends you communication on Facebook and it says, Wells Fargo has been hacked. Please update your credentials right now because there's a major risk. And you get scared and you click on that link, page looks like it's Wells Fargo, you change your password, and oh wow, okay, I just thwarted that issue. I'm good, I can move about my day. But you don't realize you just gave hackers your information and they spread that through misinformation on social media. And you may have even taken that article that says Wells Fargo's got hacked, you should update your password. You sent that to your whole family, all your friends, because you know a lot of them use Wells Fargo. And you can see how this can spread. This is not a new thing, but with AI, these things can happen faster and at greater frequency. Because the fake website, the news article that's published, all these things can be created faster. And not just Wells Fargo. It could be other banks. It could be your Instacart account. It could be anything. So you have to be very careful of how you're receiving this information, especially if it looks like it's coming from social media. So how do you mitigate this risk? This is a tough one because it was tough in the last election cycle when fake news was all over the place. Sometimes you would read one article that said A and another article said B, which was the opposite, and they're both flourishing throughout social media, right? So this one you have to kind of put your thinking cap on and figure out how you can suss these situations out. If you get an article shared with you that Wells Fargo has been hacked and click on this link, first thing I would do, go on Google, Wells Fargo hacked. Does anything come up? Nothing came up? Chances are it might be fake news. And you could do that with any type of example in the misinformation category. If you see something that you're like, well, I don't know, oh my God, the government got hacked, oh my God, the Department of Defense is attacking our military base, oh my God, all these things that are happening, just go ahead and put it in Google and see if there's a bunch of articles saying the same thing, or it's really just this one place that you saw it, right? That's probably the best way to mitigate that risk.